Rain poured down on Orion 4 as a 6-year-old alien girl was publicly shamed and abandoned after her father's funeral. Her stepmother poured purified water over her head in a twisted ritual. Then a weathered Earth human stepped forward. He placed himself between the child and the colonists, his voice cutting through the storm. What mattered now was getting Liara away from these people. The rain came down cold on Orion 4, a steady gray curtain that soaked everything it touched. Serena stood over the child with a ceremonial vessel, her movements precise and detached. She poured the purified water over Liara's head, the liquid running in icy streams down the girl's blue skin. This was the ritual of cleansing, meant to wash away impure lineage from the family bloodline. The water symbolized purity, but the act carried the weight of exclusion. Colonial law stood behind this cruelty, giving it the force of tradition. The statutes allowed for the removal of mixed-blood children from prominent families, citing preservation of genetic integrity. A 6-year-old alien girl now faced the storm alone, with no protection beyond what her small hands could provide. The system offered no shelter, no second chance, only the harsh reality of exile. Varric stood watch at the perimeter, his large frame blocking any potential interference. His security uniform marked him as enforcer of colonial authority, his presence a silent warning to the gathered crowd. He held a pulse rifle loosely but ready, his eyes scanning for any movement. Nobody would challenge this decision while he stood guard. The colonists watched from under hoods and rain gear, their faces shadowed and unreadable. They formed a half-circle around the proceedings, a silent audience to the abandonment. Some looked away into the distance, others stared with blank acceptance. Their silence spoke louder than any protest might have, confirming the social order that valued bloodlines above compassion. This moment captured the essence of Orion 4's harsh hierarchy. Status came from pure ancestry, from maintaining genetic lines unbroken by off-world influence. The colony had built its identity on separation, on keeping what they considered theirs untouched by external contamination. The child represented a breach in that system, a living reminder of forbidden connections. Liara stood shivering in her thin funeral clothes, water plastering her dark hair against her skull. Her father's burial mound stood fresh-turned nearby, the rain already smoothing its edges. She had lost her parent and her home in the same hour, left to face the elements with nothing but the clothes she wore. Her small frame trembled, but she made no sound. Then movement came from the back of the crowd. A figure pushed through the colonists, his steps creating splashes in the gathering puddles. His earth-made boots marked him as outsider, their design different from local footwear. The man moved with purpose, ignoring the murmured reactions around him. Manus Ray placed himself between the child and her stepmother, his body blocking the rain from the girl. His face showed the weathering of hard cycles, lines etched around eyes that had seen too much. He kept his stance relaxed but ready, his attention fixed on Serena. His voice cut through the storm's steady patter, low and firm. What mattered now was getting Liara away from these people. The words hung in the air, a statement of intent that changed everything. He didn't look at the child, didn't try to comfort her. His focus remained on the threat. But his position made his purpose clear. He would be the barrier between the girl and those who would harm her. Manus Ray didn't look like a hero. He looked like someone who'd seen too much, weathered too many storms. His face had the creases of a man used to squinting into harsh suns and bitter winds. Earth-human features marked him as an outsider, among the blue-skinned colonists with their cranial ridges and violet eyes. He stood there, rain darkened and steady, while everyone else seemed part of some alien mural he'd stepped into. He moved with a quiet authority that needed no announcement. Serena started protesting immediately, her voice sharp with indignation. Varric shifted his weight, tightening his grip on the pulse rifle. Manus ignored them both. He reached into his worn coat and produced a sealed document case. The materials inside were official, thick synth paper bearing the seals of Earth Central and the Colonial Administration Authority. He held them out not as a request but as a statement. Kalen Thor had filed these papers 6 months earlier. He'd named Manus legal guardian of Liara in the event of his death. The revelation hit the colonists like a physical blow. Murmurs broke through the rain's rhythm. This wasn't some emotional intervention. It was the enforcement of a dead man's last will, backed by the full weight of interstellar law. Manus wasn't there to plead. He was there to collect. Serena tried to counter with colonial statutes, her words quick and legalistic. She cited bloodline purity acts, hereditary succession codes. Manus listened, then responded calmly. He referenced interstellar custodianship clauses, cross-colonial guardian provisions. His voice stayed low, but it carried. He wasn't debating. He was informing. Colonial law ended where Earth jurisdiction began, and Kalen had made sure his daughter fell under Earth's protection. The moral certainty in Manus's stance made the colonists' actions seem small and cruel. Where they relied on tradition and exclusion, he stood on law and loyalty. The confrontation didn't escalate. Varric kept his weapon lowered, recognizing the authority in those documents. Serena fell silent, her arguments exhausted. The rain continued its steady fall, washing over the standoff. Manus turned to Liara, his movement deliberate. He didn't smile or offer empty comfort. He simply gestured for her to follow. The girl hesitated only a moment, then stepped toward him, away from the funeral gathering, away from the only home she'd known. They walked through the crowd, which parted silently. No one tried to stop them. He wasn't seeking glory or gratitude. This was duty, plain and simple. Kalen had been his friend. They'd served together, survived together. This was the last promise, the one that mattered. Manus led the girl toward a waiting ground transport, its engine humming softly in the rain. He opened the door, helped her inside, then took his seat. The vehicle moved off, leaving the colonists and their cruel rituals behind. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was safer than the past they were leaving. The orbital workshop hummed with the low vibration of life support systems and dormant machinery. Liara sat on a crate, her small hands clutching the only thing she'd brought from home, a smooth, metallic toy core. It was the kind of plaything colonial children used to learn basic engineering, with interlocking parts and a simple power cell. But Manus knew better. Kalen had told him about it in their last transmission, spoken in code between old soldiers. He took the core from her, his fingers finding the hidden seam Kalen had described. The surface yielded under pressure, revealing a recessed activation switch. He pressed it. The core warmed in his palm, then projected a flickering hologram into the air between them. Kalen Thor's image formed, translucent and haunted, his voice emerging through a wash of static. "I discovered something in the deep caves," the recording whispered. Kalen's face strained with urgency. "They're not just studying indigenous life. They're weaponizing it." The message unfolded like a confession. Kalen spoke of hidden laboratories, of genetic tampering with native species. He described creatures being modified for aggression, for toxicity, for obedience to colonial command signals. These weren't scientific experiments. They were biological weapons in development, violations of interstellar treaties and basic ethics. He named names implicating the colony's leadership council. Serena knew. Varric oversaw security for the project. The purification rituals, the bloodline laws, all of it served to maintain control over the truth. The colony's entire social structure existed to hide this secret. Kalen's trust in Manus was absolute. He'd chosen an Earth human because no colonist could be trusted. He needed someone outside their system, someone bound by older loyalties. The message ended with a simple request: protect Liara and expose the truth. Manus absorbed the data, the pieces clicking into place. Kalen's sudden illness, the rushed funeral, the immediate move against Liara. It all made sense now. This wasn't just about a child's inheritance or family prejudice. Kalen had been murdered to silence him. Liara wasn't just an orphan. She was a witness, and the toy core was evidence. The personal rescue had just become something larger. Manus looked at the girl, then at the fading hologram. She held proof that could dismantle the colony's leadership, maybe even trigger an interstellar investigation. Her safety meant more than one life now. It meant preventing a biological weapons program from reaching completion. He handed the core back to Liara. Her small fingers closed around it, protective. She didn't understand the full weight of what she carried, but she knew it was important. Manus saw Kalen's determination in her eyes. The father had died for this truth. The daughter would carry it forward. The workshop felt different now. The hum of machinery sounded like warning signals. The shadows in the corner seemed to hold new threats. Manus began checking his equipment, his movements methodical. They had evidence. They had a mission, and they had enemies who would stop at nothing to keep that core silent. Liara watched him work, the toy core warm in her hand. She didn't know the word for biological weapons. She didn't understand interstellar law, but she knew her father had left her a message, and the grim Earthman was going to help her honor it. The breach came without warning. Varric's security team cut through the workshop doors with thermal lances, their movements synchronized and efficient. They fanned out in tactical formation, pulse rifles scanning the cluttered space. Manus pushed Liara behind a generator housing, his hand already reaching for the nearest tool rack. He grabbed a plasma cutter and slammed its housing against a metal stanchion. The casing broke away, leaving a jagged spear of focused energy in his hands. He moved through the workshop like he knew every conduit and crawl space. Wiring spools became tripwires strung at ankle height. Hydraulic fluid containers were tipped to create slick patches on the deck plating. The security team advanced, their superior technology hampered by the chaotic environment. Their sensors couldn't predict improvisation. Their training hadn't covered a man who turned maintenance equipment into weapons. Drones entered behind the security team, hovering on quiet repulsors. They extended scanning arrays seeking heat signatures. Manus threw a handful of thermal tiles into a smelting furnace. The sudden heat bloom confused their sensors, making them hesitate. That hesitation bought seconds. He used those seconds to move Liara to the next cover point, his hand firm on her shoulder. His fighting style showed his background. No wasted motion, no dramatic gestures. He used the plasma spear to disable a drone with a quick thrust to its guidance array. He kicked a tool cart into the path of advancing security personnel. Every movement served multiple purposes, creating barriers, disabling threats, buying time. This was someone who understood combat as resource management. Liara watched from her hiding place. She saw how Manus used the environment instead of fighting against it. She noticed how he listened for equipment hums and boot echoes to track their pursuers. These were lessons her father had tried to teach her about reading terrain, but now she saw them applied in life-or-death practice. Her small hands tightened around the toy core in her pocket. The situation turned when Varric's team cornered them near the docking bay access. They were pinned between security forces and a sealed blast door, with no clear escape route. Pulse rifles whined as they powered up to maximum. Varric stepped forward, his weapon raised. This was the end of the line. Then Liara remembered the lullaby. Her father had taught it to her years ago, calling it their secret cave song. He said it mimicked the territorial cry of ridge stalkers, the predatory creatures that inhabited Orion 4's network. She took a breath and let the strange, warbling notes escape her lips. The sound echoed through the metal corridor, unnatural and compelling. The effect was immediate. The security team froze, their training overcoming their advance. Ridge stalker cries meant danger even to armed groups. The drones hesitated in their targeting patterns, their algorithms trying to classify the sound. That moment of confusion was all Manus needed. He lunged forward while they were distracted, driving the plasma spear into the control panel of the blast door. Sparks flew as the mechanism short-circuited. The door slid open just enough for a person to slip through. He grabbed Liara and pushed her into the gap, following close behind. The security team recovered too late, their shots hitting the closing door. They were through, but now trapped in the docking bay with limited options. The chase continued, but they had gained a temporary advantage. The cave entrance was a narrow crack in the rock face, damp and uninviting. Manus went first, testing each foothold before allowing Liara to follow. The descent demanded complete focus. Loose stones skittered away into darkness below them. The air grew cooler as they went deeper, carrying a mineral scent mixed with something organic and strange. Their breathing echoed in the tight space, each sound magnified by the enclosing walls. This wasn't just a physical test. It was a measure of trust, each relying on the other not to make a fatal mistake. The passage opened into a vast chamber that made them both pause. The ceiling rose into shadows high above, beyond the reach of their helmet lights. The walls glowed with a soft blue luminescence, the light coming from thousands of tiny organisms clinging to the stone. They pulsed gently, like a slow heartbeat made visible. The effect was both beautiful and unsettling, casting everything in an eerie underwater light. Stalactites hung like teeth from above, dripping water into pools that reflected the blue glow. The scale of the place felt ancient and indifferent to their small presence. Kalen had left markers only someone who knew his patterns would recognize. A small scratch on a rock formation here, a particular crystal cluster placed there. Manus followed these subtle signs, his eyes scanning the chamber walls. They led toward the center of the space where a natural stone column rose from the floor, its surface smooth and almost sculpted. The bioluminescent growth was thicker here, making the column stand out against the darker surroundings. It looked like a natural altar, waiting for something. A sealed container rested on top of the column, its design clearly artificial amidst the natural formations. It was made of a dull gray metal, about the size of a small storage crate. A biometric scanner was set into its surface, glowing with a soft red light that contrasted with the blue environment. The security system was advanced, far beyond typical colonial technology. The lock required specific genetic authorization to open, a failsafe against unauthorized access. Liara approached the column, her small form dwarfed by the massive chamber. She stretched up on her toes, her blue hand barely reaching the scanner plate. The device glowed brighter as it read her DNA, comparing it against stored patterns. For a moment nothing happened. Then a series of clicks echoed through the cavern. The container's lid slid back with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Inside lay a data crystal, its facets catching the blue light and reflecting it in sharp patterns. It was larger than the toy core, its construction more complex. Manus lifted it carefully, feeling its weight. This was what Kaelin had died for. The crystal contained detailed records, genetic sequences and project logs that confirmed everything from the hologram message. The biological weapons program was real, extensive, and involved the highest levels of colonial leadership. They had just begun to process the discovery when lights appeared at the chamber entrance behind them. Varric's security team had found their trail. The beams of their rifles swept across the cavern floor, searching. The team moved in formation, their progress methodical and determined. The new priority became immediately clear. They had to get the crystal to safety before Varric could destroy it. The evidence couldn't fall into the wrong hands, and the wrong hands were now entering the chamber behind them. The data crystal felt heavy in Manus's hand, its facets catching the cavern's blue light. This single artifact represented everything Kaelin Thor had died to protect. The weight wasn't just physical. It carried the burden of proof, the cost of truth, the price of one man's conscience. He turned it slowly, examining the precision of its construction. The manufacturing quality stood out immediately, too advanced for colonial workshops. This was Earth-level technology, sophisticated and expensive, the kind used in secure government or military applications. Its presence here suggested outside involvement beyond the colony's leadership. Manus understood the colonial leadership's desperation now. This crystal didn't just document their crimes, it implicated them in violations of interstellar treaties. The weaponization of indigenous species crossed lines that Earth Central took seriously. There would be audits, tribunals, possible sanctions. The colony's autonomy could be revoked, their leadership tried off-world. This evidence threatened their power structure at its foundation. They couldn't allow it to reach proper authorities. Liara's small hand touched the crystal's surface. Her genetic connection to her father had become their most valuable asset. The biometric lock had required either Kaelin's genetic signature or his direct descendant's DNA to open. Kaelin had built this failsafe into his discovery deliberately. He ensured only his bloodline could access the truth, preventing the evidence from falling into the wrong hands. The system couldn't be hacked or bypassed with technology alone. It demanded biological proof of relationship. This revelation transformed the girl's role completely. She was no longer just a vulnerable child needing protection. She had become a key witness, her very DNA holding the power to expose a biological weapons conspiracy. Her small body carried the genetic key that could unlock justice for her father's murder and prevent atrocities. The colonial leadership hadn't just been trying to exile an inconvenient half-breed child, they'd been trying to eliminate the only person who could access this evidence. Manus's mission parameters shifted as he held the crystal. He wasn't just protecting a child anymore. He was safeguarding evidence that could save countless lives. The biological weapons program threatened entire sectors if left unchecked. Kaelin's research showed deliberate manipulation of native species into controlled weapon systems. The implications went beyond one colony's corruption. This could destabilize regional security if the technology spread. Their fates became inextricably linked to the crystal's journey. Liara's survival meant the evidence could reach Earth Central. Her capture or death would mean the truth might die with her. The biometric lock meant she couldn't simply hand the crystal to someone else for delivery. She had to physically accompany it to authorized facilities where her DNA could authenticate the evidence properly. This wasn't a data transfer. It was a physical journey requiring the living key. Manus looked at the girl, then at the crystal. He saw Kalen's planning in every detail. The father had protected his daughter by making her essential to justice. He'd given her not just survival, but purpose. The colonial leaders had tried to discard her as impurity, but Kalen had engineered her into the central component of their downfall. The abandoned child held more power than the entire colonial council realized. He secured the crystal in a protected pouch on his equipment belt. The weight felt familiar now, like carrying ammunition into a firefight. Every mission had its objective, and this was theirs. Get the evidence to Earth Central. Keep the key alive. Let truth do the rest. The path would be dangerous, but the alternative was unthinkable. Biological weapons loose in the sector, Kalen's death unavenged, and a child sacrificed to corruption. Manus adjusted the pouch's strap, his movements sure. They had their orders from a dead man, and they would follow them. The spiral ascent stretched ahead, a narrow path twisting upward through rock. Manus kept Liara behind him, his attention split between the climb and the sounds below. Varric's security team was closing fast, their bootsteps echoing through the chamber. The confined space amplified every sound, every breath. Manus could hear their equipment rattling, their communications crackling. The ascent became a test of leadership under pressure, each decision carrying immediate consequences. Varric's voice cut through the echoes. Surrender the evidence. This is your final warning. He stood below them, weapon raised. His security team fanned out, blocking any retreat. The demand was plain and uncompromising. Give up the crystal or face lethal force. The weapons whined as they powered to maximum setting. There would be no negotiation, only compliance or elimination. Manus didn't raise his own weapon. He kept his voice low but clear. You killed her father for this. The words hung in the air, an accusation that needed no elaboration. He wasn't stating facts, he was drawing a line. Truth wouldn't be surrendered to fear, no matter the firepower arrayed against them. The statement signaled his refusal to compromise, his commitment to seeing Kalen's mission through. The confrontation intensified the fundamental conflict playing out in the cavern. Varric represented colonial ambition weaponized, the turning of science toward control and destruction. His authority came from enforcement, from the ability to impose will through force. Manus stood as protector of both child and truth, his authority coming from loyalty and moral conviction. One sought to conceal crimes, the other to expose them. The standoff became a distillation of their opposing values. Liara watched the security team's movements, her small body pressed against the rock wall. She remembered the cave's acoustic properties from her father's lessons. The chamber amplified certain frequencies, creating strange echoes that confused sound localization.
She took a breath and produced the ridge stalker cry again, but modified it.
She added harmonics that bounced off specific rock formations, creating the illusion of multiple creatures moving in the darkness above. The effect was immediate and chaotic. The security team instinctively looked upward, their training overriding their advance. Ridge stalkers were territorial and dangerous, their attacks swift and lethal. The diversion created precious seconds of confusion. Varric barked orders to maintain discipline, but the psychological impact had already taken hold. Manus seized the opportunity. He pushed Liara toward a narrow fissure in the wall that Kalen's markers had indicated. The opening was barely visible, disguised by rock formations and shadow. They slipped through just as the security team regained cohesion. The passage was tight, requiring them to move sideways through the rock. The sounds of pursuit faded behind them as the tunnel twisted and turned. They emerged onto a mountain overlook, the sudden openness a shock after the confined spaces. The blue forest spread out below them, a vast expanse of alien vegetation stretching to the horizon. The view offered both danger and potential escape. The forest could provide cover, but it also held unknown threats and challenges. They stood on a narrow ledge, the wind pulling at their clothing. Their survival would require cooperation that transcended species differences. Human endurance and alien knowledge would need to combine into effective action. The path forward wasn't clear, but turning back wasn't an option. They had the evidence, they had each other, and they had Varric's team closing in from behind. The next moves would determine whether truth would survive this mountain. The turn toward collaboration came through Liara's mentor, Professor Navari. She found them at the mountain overlook, her research vehicle humming quietly on the ledge. Navari moved with the precise motions of a scientist, but her eyes held the determination of someone risking everything. She offered shelter at her remote field station, a place Varric's teams hadn't yet searched. The vehicle's interior smelled of ozone and soil samples, a familiar scent that made Liara relax slightly. This was someone her father had trusted. Navari provided more than just temporary safety. She had a dangerous plan for getting them off Orion 4. The Polar Research Station operated with some independence from colonial administration. Its shuttle facility offered their best chance at escape outside official channels. She explained the route through secured areas, the timing required, the risks involved. Her words were measured and technical, but the stakes were clear. Failure meant capture or death for all of them. Her fellow scientist Sarath joined the planning through secure comms. His face appeared on Navari's screen, his features sharp with concentration. He mapped their route through the polar station's logistics sectors, highlighting security checkpoints and blind spots. His knowledge of the facility's layout became crucial. Sarath was stationed there, his opposition to Varric's administration making him willing to help. This wasn't just about friendship. It was about resisting corruption. The alliance revealed how ethical scientific networks could operate within politicized regimes. Navari and Sarath represented colleagues who believed in truth over compliance. They used their positions not for personal gain, but to uphold principles their leadership had abandoned. The trio, human soldier, alien child, and colonial scientists, became a convergence of different species working toward a common goal. Their collaboration proved courage existed within the colony's structures, waiting for the right moment to act. Navari detailed the escape method. A secure exit existed through agricultural transport systems. Thermal adaptive crops shipped daily to the polar station in insulated crates. The security scans looked for contaminants, not stowaways. The crates' insulation would help mask their presence from life-form detectors. This route bypassed main security channels, using routine scientific operations as cover. The plan was dangerous but possible with precise execution. Trusted contacts within the research community agreed to help. Navari spoke of colleagues who would create distractions, alter logs, provide access codes. These weren't revolutionaries, they were scientists who believed in ethical research and truth. Their assistance would be quiet, professional, and deniable. This network operated under the radar of colonial security, its existence unknown to Varric's administration. The system contained its own resistance hidden in plain sight. The alliance demonstrated that not all colonists supported the weaponization program. Many scientists disapproved but kept silent for safety. Navari and Sarath represented those who reached their limit, who chose action over compliance. Their courage came not from weaponry but from conviction. They offered skills and knowledge that Manus lacked: access, information, and insider understanding of colonial systems. Their plan demanded perfect timing and absolute secrecy. The agricultural transport departed at dawn tomorrow. They had one chance to get into the crates before loading. The polar station operation required synchronized actions across multiple points. Sarath would handle station-side preparations while Navari managed the departure end. Any mistake would trigger alerts and bring Varric's security down on them all. The margin for error was zero. Manus listened to the plan, his military mind assessing each variable. He saw the risks but recognized their only viable option. The polar station offered a path off-world that didn't require fighting through Varric's security forces. It leveraged the colonial administration's arrogance about its control systems. They would use the regime's own infrastructure against it, turning routine science into an escape route. Liara watched the scientist's plan, her small face serious. These were her father's people, colleagues who believed in discovery rather than destruction. Their methodical approach reminded her of Kalen's way of thinking through problems. The alliance gave her more than hope. It showed that her father's values lived on in others. Their courage wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and it might just save them all. The escape plan required them to become cargo. They entered the insulated crates just before dawn, the cold metal surfaces already slick with condensation from the thermal adaptive crops inside. Liara's crate held root vegetables specifically engineered for polar research. their unique cellular structure maintaining a stable temperature that would help mask her presence. Manus took the adjacent crate, their containers placed side by side in the loading queue. The space was cramped, forcing them to curl into tight positions among the produce. This was no dignified escape. It was concealment through inconvenience, trading comfort for anonymity. Navari coordinated with her contacts through secure channels. She verified loading schedules, security rotations, and scanner calibration times. Her movements were precise as she directed the crate placement, ensuring they would be in the middle of the shipment. Trusted colleagues at the polar station confirmed their readiness to receive the cargo without unusual inspections. The operation depended on these silent partnerships, on people willing to risk their positions for truth. The communication was minimal, each message carrying weight beyond its words. The crates moved through polar station logistics under scientific classification. Automated loaders lifted them onto transport vehicles without human intervention. The system recognized them as agricultural research materials bound for off-world analysis. This routine classification provided their cover, blending them into the daily flow of legitimate scientific work. The colonial administration trusted its automated processes, never considering that someone would use their own research infrastructure against them. The arrogance of control created the very vulnerability they exploited. Liara's small size became an advantage in the confined space. She could tuck herself between the root vegetables, her body conforming to the available gaps. The insulation kept the cold from becoming dangerous, but the air still carried a chill that made her shiver. She focused on the tapping sounds from the next crate, the only communication possible through the thick walls. Manus used a simple pattern: 1 tap for OK, 2 for problem, 3 for danger. The rhythm became their lifeline, a way to maintain contact without words. Automated scanning systems passed over the crates during loading and transit. The sensors looked for life signs and contraband but registered only plant biology. The thermal adaptive crops emitted a consistent heat signature that overlapped with human ranges. The insulation further confused the readings, creating a blanket effect that masked individual sources. The technology was designed to catch obvious threats, not carefully concealed stowaways. The system's limitations became their protection. Their success hinged on colonial assumptions about security procedures. The administration trusted their automated systems completely, never considering manual inspections might be necessary. The routine nature of agricultural transport meant it received less scrutiny than other cargo. The scientists handling the shipment were colleagues who either knew about the operation or simply followed standard protocols without questions. Every aspect relied on the system's complacency, on the belief that nobody would dare misuse scientific channels this way. The transport vehicle's engines rumbled to life, vibrations passing through the crate walls. The movement started rough, jostling them against the vegetables and container sides. The journey would be uncomfortable, but discomfort was preferable to capture. They could hear the sounds of the loading bay fading behind them, replaced by the hum of engines and the crunch of tires on gravel. Each kilometer put distance between them and Varric's security teams, each moment taking them closer to potential freedom. The crates became their temporary sanctuary, their prison and their vehicle all at once. The risk remained constant throughout the transit. Any thorough inspection would reveal them. Any deviation from the planned route could mean discovery, but the colonial administration's confidence in their systems worked in their favor. The routine was their shield, the ordinary nature of their concealment their best protection. They moved through checkpoints undetected, hidden in plain sight among the very crops the colony itself had developed. The irony wasn't lost on Manus as he tapped once against the crate wall, signaling they were still safe. The polar plan solidified into something between an escape and a heist against colonial security protocols. They moved through maintenance corridors that smelled of ozone and recycled air, their steps quick and quiet. Sarath's voice came through Navari's comm, guiding them toward the research shuttle bay. He had already begun reprogramming the flight path from his station, altering the atmospheric survey mission into an orbital escape run. The shuttle systems weren't designed for extended vacuum operation, but Sarath believed they could manage it with careful management of power and life support. The risk was high, but it was their only viable exit. The atmospheric research shuttle sat in its bay, its hull still marked with polar ice residue from its last mission. It was a scientific vessel, not a transport, with sensors and sampling equipment mounted on its wings. Sarath's modifications would allow it to reach orbit, but just barely. The retrofitting required rerouting power from non-essential systems, prioritizing thrust over everything else. This offered a potential lifeline, though it came with the certainty of continued pursuit. Colonial security vessels would be waiting once they broke atmosphere. The shuttle crew moved with the focused efficiency of scientists performing a familiar routine. They conducted pre-flight checks, their movements precise and professional. But their eyes kept drifting toward the cargo access point where Manus and Liara waited. They were navigating two missions simultaneously, the apparent scientific survey and the actual escape operation. Their professionalism held, but the tension was palpable in the set of their shoulders and the quick glances they exchanged. They knew the stakes, and they knew Varric's teams were already searching polar facilities. Liara's genetic connection became critical when they reached the shuttle's security locks. The vessel required biometric authorization for departure, a standard colonial protocol to prevent unauthorized flights. Her small hand on the scanner activated Kalen's old clearance codes, still embedded in the system. Without her DNA, they would be trapped by the very security measures designed to protect colonial assets. The system recognized her as Kalen Thor's descendant, granting access that would have been impossible to obtain through force or hacking. The tension came from maintaining the appearance of normal operations while preparing for escape. The shuttle needed to look like it was on a standard research mission until the last possible moment. Any deviation from procedure would trigger alerts. The crew worked with controlled urgency, their actions just within acceptable parameters for a scientific departure. They loaded additional supplies under the guise of extended atmospheric sampling, actually preparing for orbital transit. The deception was delicate, requiring perfect timing and absolute coordination. Varric's security apparatus was already active around the polar station. Patrols moved through adjacent sectors, checking storage areas and transport bays. Their search was methodical, but slowed by the station's size and the number of research facilities. The security teams operated on the assumption that fugitives would hide, not attempt to leave the planet. This arrogance created their narrow window of opportunity, but that window was closing with each passing minute. Alerts would spread once Varric realized where they were headed. Their departure window was measured in minutes, not hours. Sarath monitored security channels from his station, feeding them updates through encrypted bursts. He reported increased patrol activity near the shuttle bays, likely routine but still concerning. The crew accelerated their preparations, moving with quiet urgency rather than visible panic. Every system check, every secured compartment, every calibrated instrument brought them closer to launch or discovery. The shuttle's engines began their warm-up sequence, the sound a low hum that vibrated through the deck plates. Manus watched the crew work, his military mind assessing their progress against possible threat responses. He calculated response times, intercept courses, evasion options. The shuttle wasn't built for combat or high-speed maneuvers. Their survival would depend on surprise and the quality of Sarath's programming. Liara stayed close to him, her small hand occasionally touching the data crystal pouch on his belt. She understood they were reaching the critical point, where plans either worked or failed completely. The polar winds howled outside the bay doors, waiting for them to make their move. Sarath worked quickly at the engineering station, his hands moving across the controls with practiced precision. He rerouted power from non-essential systems to thrust and life support, making calculations that balanced performance against detection risk. His modifications had to maintain the shuttle's appearance as a normal research vessel until the last possible moment. The cover story needed to hold through pre-flight checks and initial ascent. Any deviation from standard atmospheric survey protocols would trigger alerts. This required technical skill married to ethical conviction. He was betraying his employer for a higher truth. The shuttle had to look like it was conducting routine data collection. Sensor arrays remained active, sampling equipment powered up exactly as expected. The flight path followed established survey patterns during the initial phase. Only after reaching upper atmosphere would the real mission begin. The continued ascent beyond approved altitudes would definitely trigger security alerts. Colonial monitoring stations tracked all orbital activity meticulously. Their response would be swift and severe once they realized this wasn't a malfunction. They calculated colonial response times against their acceleration capabilities. Sarath estimated how long it would take security forces to scramble intercept vessels. He measured their thrust potential against the shuttle's modified performance. The numbers were tight, the margin for error almost non-existent. Every second counted, every kilometer of altitude gained before detection improved their chances. The shuttle wasn't built for evasive maneuvers, it was a scientific vessel, slow and purposeful in design. Liara's presence provided unexpected advantages. Her genetic connection to Kalen allowed her to bypass certain security checks through inherited clearance codes. She placed her hand on biometric scanners when required, her father's authorization still valid in the systems. This access shortened procedures that might have delayed them. Varric hadn't anticipated this vulnerability in colonial security protocols. He'd assumed cutting Kalen out of the system would eliminate his influence, not considering the daughter's inherited rights. Kalen's security clearances remained active in the shuttle's computers, accessible through his daughter's DNA. The system recognized her as legitimate personnel with research authorization. This granted them access to navigation controls and communication channels that would otherwise require senior approval. The advantage was small but critical, saving precious minutes during the launch sequence. It also provided limited access to atmospheric data that helped Sarath optimize their escape trajectory. The shuttle transformed from research vehicle to escape craft through these modifications. Its sampling equipment became deadweight. Its sensors now served deception rather than science. The vessel strained against its design limitations, pushed to perform beyond its intended purpose. The crew worked with focused intensity, aware that each adjustment brought them closer to either freedom or capture. The craft hummed with redirected power, its systems operating outside normal parameters. Their gamble depended entirely on colonial arrogance about control systems. The administration trusted their monitoring technology completely. They believed no one would dare misuse scientific assets this way. They expected compliance, not ingenuity. This confidence created blind spots in their security posture. The routine nature of research missions meant they received less scrutiny than military or transport flights. The deception exploited this institutional complacency. Sarath monitored security channels while working, his attention divided between modifications and threat assessment. He heard routine status reports, none indicating awareness of their plans yet. The calm communications suggested they still had time. The shuttle's systems responded to his adjustments, power levels rising steadily. The craft was almost ready for its unauthorized journey. The crew took their positions, their faces set in expressions of professional concentration masking underlying tension. The countdown to departure began, each second stretching under the weight of their gamble. The polar winds continued their constant moan outside the bay, waiting to test their escape. The ascent became a tight cat-and-mouse game across Orion 4's orbital space. Colonial pursuit vessels closed in, their tracking systems locking onto the research shuttle's signature. The security teams attempted remote override of the shuttle's controls, sending command signals to disable its systems. The shuttle's pilots countered each attempt, their hands moving across consoles with focused precision. The battle played out through electronic warfare, invisible but just as dangerous as weapons fire. The pilots engineered a deception using the shuttle's atmospheric sensors. They reconfigured the sampling equipment to create false readings that suggested critical system failures. The data stream showed fluctuating power levels and erratic thruster performance. To colonial monitors, it appeared the vessel was experiencing multiple malfunctions rather than attempting escape. The ruse bought them precious time before security realized their true intentions. Every second of confusion meant additional distance gained. Manus moved to the communication station, his fingers working the controls with practiced efficiency. He broadcast a distress call on the trade frequencies, the channels used by civilian vessels between systems. His voice remained calm but urgent as he transmitted. The message identified him as an Earth citizen, with critical evidence of treaty violations. He gave their position and situation, stating they were pursued by unauthorized colonial security forces. The call was a gamble, but it was their best chance for outside help. The transmission contained encrypted fragments of Kalen's evidence. The data packets were small, but contained enough information to show the biological weapons implications. Earth authorities would recognize the signatures of prohibited research and development. The message wasn't just a call for rescue, it was a preliminary report to the proper authorities. Even if they were captured, someone might have received enough evidence to initiate an investigation. Their hope was that someone would intercept the signal before colonial jamming could block it. The trade lanes near Orion 4 saw regular traffic from independent freighters and survey vessels. Any ship monitoring those frequencies might pick up the distress call. The colonial security forces would be attempting to block and locate the transmission, but space was vast and signals could travel far before being suppressed. The deception had to hold just long enough for the message to get through. The shuttle continued its upward trajectory, pushing against the planet's gravity. The pilots maintained the malfunction narrative while actually increasing speed. Colonial pursuit vessels hesitated, their commanders confused by the conflicting sensor data. Some held position, waiting for clarification from command. Others continued pursuit but at reduced speed, concerned about the apparent system failures. The division in their response created gaps in the net closing around the shuttle. Manus monitored the communication channels, listening for any response to his distress call. Static and jamming signals filled most frequencies, but he caught fragments of possible acknowledgments. The encryption made it difficult to determine if anyone had received the full message. He continued transmitting at intervals, varying frequencies and power levels to avoid complete suppression. The effort was draining the shuttle's limited power reserves, but it was their only link to potential rescue. The trade lane boundaries represented relative safety under interstellar law. Colonial security vessels had limited jurisdiction beyond those markers. If they could reach that line, they might find protection from neutral parties. The deception needed to hold until they crossed into that contested space. The pilots pushed the engines to their limits, calculating the remaining distance and time. The pursuit continued behind them, but the gap was widening slightly. The cat-and-mouse game continued, each side trying to outthink the other in the vast darkness of space. The moment of truth arrived as a massive freighter emerged from the trade lane boundary. Its identification codes identified the horizon, an Earth-registered vessel en route to the central systems. Its sudden appearance altered the entire equation, a tangible presence that changed potential into reality. The ship answered their distress call immediately, its course shifting to intercept their position. The colonial pursuit vessels fell back, their aggressive maneuvers replaced by cautious holding patterns. The horizon's size and authority created a barrier the colonial forces wouldn't challenge directly. Its arrival flipped the dynamic from desperate chase to organized rescue. The freighter's docking bay opened, revealing a well-lit interior with medical and security teams standing ready. The shuttle received clearance to approach, its damaged condition now under professional assessment. Earth authorities and medical personnel prepared to receive the fugitives, their movements efficient and coordinated. The colonial security vessels maintained distance, their weapon systems powered down but still active. The standoff became a matter of jurisdiction rather than firepower. The freighter captain agreed to provide asylum without hesitation. She was a stern-faced woman with the bearing of prior military service, her decisions coming quickly and with authority. She offered transport to Earth Central for Manus and Liara, along with protection under interstellar law. Her commitment was clear and uncompromising, backed by the weight of Earth's trade authority. She understood the implications of their situation without needing extensive explanation. The offer included the Orionian crew members who had helped them escape, recognizing their vulnerability if they returned. Manus presented the data crystal as evidence of the illegal experimentation. He held it out, the facets catching the freighter's interior lighting. His explanation was brief and direct, stating the facts without embellishment. Kalen Thor discovered it and was killed for his trouble. The words carried the weight of murder and conspiracy, of a life taken to protect a terrible secret. The captain accepted the crystal, her expression hardening at the implications. She understood this wasn't just about asylum, it was about justice. The Horizon's crew represented Earth's commitment to interstellar law and ethical governance. They moved with the confidence of people backed by proper authority and clear mandates. Their actions demonstrated a system that still functioned, that could provide protection against corruption. They promised safe passage and delivery of the evidence to the proper authorities at Earth Central. This wasn't just rescue. It was the beginning of due process, of accountability mechanisms engaging. The colonial security vessels finally broke off their pursuit, returning to Orion 4 space. Their departure signaled recognition of Earth jurisdiction and the freighter's authority. The immediate threat was over, replaced by the slower but certain machinery of interstellar justice. The Horizon's medical team checked Liara for injuries, their movements gentle and professional. Manus remained watchful but allowed the assistance, his protective stance easing slightly. Justice began its journey toward accountability, though the process would be slow and potentially dangerous. The data crystal contained proof that could trigger official investigations and legal proceedings. The colonial leadership would likely attempt countermeasures through political channels and legal challenges. But the evidence was now in the hands of Earth authorities, protected by proper procedures. The path ahead involved bureaucracy and scrutiny rather than open conflict, but the stakes remained high. The freighter's engines powered up for the jump to faster-than-light travel. The stars outside the viewport began to streak into lines of light. The journey to Earth Central would take time, during which security would be maintained and the evidence preserved. The captain assured them of protection throughout the transit, her commitment evident in her direct manner. They were safe for now, but the real work of justice was just beginning. The Horizon carried them toward answers, toward resolution, toward the proper channels that could address Kalen's murder and the biological weapons program. The fight had shifted from survival to testy. The data crystal held undeniable proof. It contained detailed records of murder and illegal genetic experimentation, showing Kalen Thor's systematic documentation of the colony's crimes. His research revealed the deliberate manipulation of indigenous Orionian life into biological weapons, a clear violation of multiple interstellar treaties. The evidence showed how native species were genetically altered for aggression, toxicity, and response to command signals. This wasn't accidental contamination. It was purposeful weapons development disguised as scientific research. The crystal's contents implicated Orion 4's leadership in a deliberate cover-up. Serena's purification rituals and Varric's security enforcement were part of maintaining this secrecy. The colonial administration had created an entire social structure to hide their illegal activities. Earth Central now became the moral arbiter against this corruption, its jurisdiction triggered by the severity of the violations. The evidence provided legal grounds for intervention, sanctions, and potential prosecution of those responsible. The crystal's sophistication suggested outside help in the weapons development. Its technology matched Earth-level manufacturing standards, not colonial capabilities. This expanded the conspiracy beyond Orion 4's leadership, indicating possible off-world involvement. The scale of the operation required resources and expertise the colony shouldn't possess alone. This transformed the situation from local corruption to potential interstellar conspiracy, increasing the investigation's scope and significance. Manus's documentation provided the legal framework for Earth's intervention. His guardianship papers, filed with Earth Central, established proper jurisdiction over Liara's case. Combined with the data crystal's evidence, this created a solid basis for official action. The Horizon's captain recognized the legal standing immediately, understanding this wasn't just asylum seekers, but a formal case requiring Earth's response. The paperwork gave them legitimacy beyond mere testimony. Liara's status transformed completely through this process. She was no longer just an orphaned child. She became a material witness in an interstellar investigation. Her genetic connection to Kalen made her testimony crucial for corroborating the evidence. Even at her young age, her knowledge of her father's work and her presence during key events gave her unique value to the investigation. The colonial leadership had tried to discard her as impurity, but she held essential truth in both her memory and her DNA. Their dangerous journey had preserved both the evidence and the witness required to validate it. The data crystal alone might have been dismissed as fabrication without Liara's testimony. Her presence gave human context to the technical evidence, making the case stronger and more compelling. They had protected not just a child, but the living proof that supported the data. This combination created a case that would be difficult for colonial authorities to explain away or suppress through legal maneuvers. The evidence presentation would follow formal procedures at Earth Central. The data crystal would undergo forensic examination to verify its authenticity and chain of custody. Liara's testimony would be recorded and evaluated by child specialists trained in witness protection. The Horizons captain would provide official reports detailing the rescue and evidence recovery. This structured approach ensured the case would receive proper attention through authorized channels, rather than becoming another suppressed colonial incident. The transformation was complete, from abandoned child to key witness, from personal rescue to interstellar case file. What began as a funeral ritual had become a matter of galactic importance. The purified water meant to wash away impurity had instead revealed corruption that extended to the highest levels. The evidence now moved toward proper authorities, protected by due process and interstellar law. The truth Kalen died for would finally receive its hearing. Orion 4 became a shrinking blue sphere in the viewport. Liara watched it diminish, her small face pressed against the cool transparency. She didn't turn when she spoke. Will we ever go back? The question hung between them, simple and heavy. It wasn't just about a place. It was about the life stolen from her, the father buried there, the home that had rejected her. Manus considered the question with the weight it deserved. He admitted his own limits as a protector. He knew weapons, tactics, survival. Parenting was unfamiliar territory. But his answer held a new vow, not to what it was. The statement acknowledged the loss while making space for something else. He wasn't offering empty promises. He was offering a different kind of future. Professor Navari's counsel echoed in the quiet cabin. Home is not always a place. The words carried a truth they were both learning. It wasn't found in coordinates or buildings. It was built in the space between people, in shared silence and mutual protection. Their connection had become that foundation, stronger than any planet's soil. Their bond had shifted completely. It was no longer just duty to a dead friend's request. The shared dangers, the quiet moments in the workshop, the trust built in dark caverns, it had all transformed into genuine family. Manus saw Kalen in Liara's expressions, but he also saw her own unique spirit. He was no longer just guarding Kalen's daughter. He was protecting his own. Manus accepted Liara as a daughter rather than a transient responsibility. The decision settled in him, quiet and certain. It wasn't a dramatic pronouncement. It was the internal shift that changed everything. He was no longer a temporary guardian. He was a father. The role felt both foreign and right, a new path he hadn't planned to walk. The adaptation required rethinking his entire solitary existence. His life had been built around mobility and self-reliance. Now he had to consider school, safety, stability. His sparse quarters would need space for a child. His mission-oriented mindset had to make room for bedtime routines and emotional support. It was a complete overhaul of his priorities and habits. Liara represented both the painful past and a possible future. She was a living link to Kalen and the tragedy they had survived. But she was also a chance to build something new, to create a life defined by choice rather than loss. Her resilience offered hope that even from deep pain, something good could grow. She was their reason to keep moving forward. Kalen's words about the convergence of species took on new meaning. Their relationship was proof of that idea. A human and an Orionian, building a family across cultural and biological divides. It was a small personal example of the larger understanding Kalen had believed in. Their bond was their own private treaty of peace and cooperation. The reluctant guardian had become a true father. The transformation was complete. He had started with a promise and ended with a commitment. The man who preferred solitude now found purpose in companionship. The soldier had discovered his most important mission wasn't on any battlefield. It was right here in this cabin with this child. They would figure out parenthood and life together step by step. There was no manual for their situation. No guide for a human raising an orphaned alien girl far from her homeworld. They would learn through trial and error, through patience and missteps. The future was an uncharted course, but they would navigate it as a team. They had the evidence secured, the horizon protecting them, and a new understanding of what family could be. The journey continued, but now they traveled it together. The full scope of Orion 4's corruption became clear during the transit to Earth Central. Kalen's evidence revealed systematic weaponization of indigenous species, not isolated experiments. The research showed deliberate genetic manipulation of native life forms into biological weapons. This violated multiple interstellar treaties and colonial agreements. The leadership had bypassed ethical reviews and scientific oversight completely. Their actions showed contempt for both interstellar law and basic moral boundaries. The purified water ritual served to maintain purity narratives around their experimentation. The public ceremonies created a false sense of traditional values while hiding illegal activities. The obsession with bloodline purity provided cover for the weapons development program. The rituals reinforced social control while the real corruption happened in secret laboratories. The colonial administration used tradition as a mask for their crimes. Serena's cruelty was part of this larger system of control and secrecy. Her treatment of Liara wasn't just personal prejudice, it was enforcement of the colony's power structure. The purification ritual served to eliminate potential witnesses and maintain the fiction of genetic purity. Her actions supported the wider conspiracy by removing threats to their secrecy. The personal cruelty served political purposes. Varric represented the militarized enforcement of this corruption. His security forces protected the weapons program and silenced opposition. He used lethal force to maintain the colony's secrets, showing complete commitment to their agenda. His pursuit of Liara and Manus demonstrated the regime's determination to suppress the truth. The security apparatus existed to serve the leadership's illegal ambitions. Earth Central's intervention would trigger colonial autonomy reviews. The evidence justified external oversight and potential sanctions. The biological weapons program represented a clear violation of interstellar law. Earth's response would involve investigations, possible tribunal proceedings, and security audits. The colonial leadership faced serious consequences for their actions. Their autonomy could be revoked entirely. The biological weapons program threatened entire sectors if unleashed. The modified organisms could destabilize regional ecosystems and security. Kalen's research showed weapons-grade modifications with offensive capabilities. The program's existence violated disarmament treaties and threatened peaceful relations. The potential damage extended far beyond Orion 4's borders. This wasn't a local matter. It was an interstellar security threat. Liara's survival ensured the truth would reach proper authorities. Her DNA had unlocked the evidence, and her testimony would support it. She carried both the genetic key and the personal knowledge of her father's work. The colonial leadership had tried to eliminate her, but she became their most credible witness. Her escape guaranteed the evidence would be heard. Their journey represented a victory for ethical science over weaponized ambition. Kalen's commitment to truth had overcome the colony's corruption. The alliance between human and alien scientists showed alternative paths forward. Their cooperation demonstrated that ethics could prevail over unchecked ambition. The escape proved that courage existed within the system. The data crystal's sophistication suggested outside help in weapons development. The technology exceeded colonial capabilities, indicating external involvement. This expanded the conspiracy beyond local leadership to possible interstellar connections. The investigation would need to follow these leads beyond Orion 4. The corruption might have wider networks supporting it. Manus's documentation provided the legal framework for Earth's intervention. His guardianship papers established proper jurisdiction and standing. Combined with the evidence, this created a solid case for action. The legal foundation ensured the response would follow proper channels. The documentation gave legitimacy to their claims and requests for protection. The escape to the horizon represented a critical turning point. Getting the evidence to Earth Central ensured proper investigation and response. The freighter's protection provided security during transit. The captain's commitment to interstellar law showed functioning systems against corruption. They had moved from being pursued to being protected. The journey continued toward justice and accountability. The Horizon's course toward Earth Central represented more than just a journey. It was systemic change in motion. Earth's justice mechanisms would now engage, protocols and procedures designed for situations exactly like this. Colonial leadership faced formal charges of murder and illegal weapons development. The case would establish legal precedents for oversight of remote colonies, potentially reshaping how settlements operated under interstellar law. Kalen's documentation provided the legal roadmap for prosecution, his meticulous records forming the foundation of the case against the Orion 4 administration. Liara's testimony would corroborate the technical evidence from the data crystal. Her knowledge of her father's work and her personal observations added human context to the digital proof. The alliance between human and alien scientists demonstrated that ethical networks could overcome corruption when they united behind truth. Professor Navari and Sarath represented colleagues willing to risk everything for principle. Their courage showed alternative paths existed within the colonial structure. Justice required collaboration across species and institutional boundaries. The freighter captain's commitment to interstellar law created the framework for proper investigation. Earth authorities would follow established procedures for evidence analysis and witness protection. The process would be slow, methodical, and thorough, designed to withstand legal challenges from the colonial administration. This wasn't about quick victory, it was about durable accountability. The case began with their testimony and evidence preservation. Manus provided detailed accounts of the escape and the threats they faced. Liara's statements were recorded with special accommodations for her age and trauma. The data crystal underwent forensic examination to verify its authenticity and chain of custody. Each step followed proper protocols to ensure the evidence remained admissible in interstellar courts. The system was designed to prevent procedural errors that could compromise the case. Colonial autonomy reviews would examine Orion IV's governance structure. Earth Central had authority to impose oversight when colonies violated interstellar agreements. The biological weapons program represented clear grounds for intervention. Possible sanctions included suspended self-governance and external monitoring. The leadership faced removal from power and potential extradition for trial. The consequences extended beyond individual punishment to systemic reform. The alliance between species became a model for ethical cooperation. Human and Orionian scientists working together showed that shared values could transcend biological differences. Their collaboration proved that corruption wasn't inevitable, that systems could be challenged from within. The network of resistance they represented offered hope for other colonies facing similar issues. Their actions demonstrated that courage existed even under oppressive regimes. The legal battle would be complex and prolonged. Colonial lawyers would likely challenge jurisdiction and evidence validity. Earth's case relied on proper documentation and witness credibility. The process would involve multiple hearings, expert testimonies, and procedural motions. Victory wasn't guaranteed, but the proper channels were now engaged. The system was designed to handle exactly this kind of interstellar conflict. The slow machinery of justice began turning. Initial filings were submitted, evidence logs created, witness statements recorded. Each action built toward eventual hearings and potential trials. The colonial leadership would have opportunity to respond through proper legal channels. The process ensured fairness while maintaining pressure for accountability. The truth was now in the system, and the system would follow its course. The horizon continued its journey, carrying both the evidence and the hope for resolution. The freighter represented Earth's commitment to lawful process over brute force. Its course was set for justice, not vengeance. The path would be long, but it was the proper path. The mechanisms were engaged, the evidence secured, the witnesses protected. What happened next would depend on the system doing its job. Liara watched the stars from the observation deck, her small hands resting against the cool transparency. The viewport showed a field of distant suns and swirling nebulae, each point of light representing possibilities she'd never considered. She wasn't thinking about the past anymore, the funeral, the rain, the fear. Her mind turned toward futures built on truth, rather than inherited lies. The vastness of space offered more than escape. It offered reinvention. This was her father's legacy. Not just the evidence they carried, but the chance to define herself beyond colonial prejudice. Manus stood nearby, his presence a quiet constant. He had accepted the fundamental transformation of their bond. The reluctant guardian had become a father through shared trials, through silent understanding earned in darkness and danger. "I don't know how to be a parent, Liara," he admitted, his voice low but clear. "Your father was my friend, but I never expected to be responsible for his child." The honesty hung between them, not as weakness but as foundation. Their relationship was built on such acknowledgments of limits, of fears, of commitment growing beyond duty. Adaptation became their shared survival skill across worlds. They had learned each other's rhythms, when to speak, when to stay silent, how to read subtle shifts in mood or posture. The man who preferred solitude now made space for a child's needs. The girl who lost everything learned to trust again. Their bond was practical before it was emotional, forged in the necessity of mutual protection. That practicality had slowly blossomed into something warmer, something neither could have predicted. Human courage and alien resilience converged to create a new model of belonging. Manus brought the stubborn persistence of Earth, the refusal to surrender against impossible odds. Liara offered the flexibility of Orionian culture, the ability to find patterns in chaos. Together they demonstrated that family could transcend species lines, that loyalty didn't require shared biology. Their partnership proved protection could evolve into parenthood through shared experience and earned trust. Kalen's legacy lived through both the crystal's data and his daughter's spirit. The evidence would bring accountability, but Liara carried forward his values: curiosity, integrity, the belief that truth mattered more than comfort. She had his determination in her eyes, his quiet stubbornness in her posture. The father lived on through the child's resilience and the proof he'd sacrificed everything to preserve. The Earth horizon carried them toward uncertainty, but they faced it together. The freighter's engines hummed steadily, a sound that promised movement toward resolution rather than away from danger. They had left Orion 4 behind, but its lessons traveled with them, about corruption, about courage, about finding light in darkness. The future held hearings and investigations, new homes and unfamiliar worlds. None of it felt daunting now that they faced it as a unit. They would approach each challenge step by step as father and daughter. The title felt natural now, earned through action rather than declared. Manus had started as a guardian fulfilling a promise. He had become a parent through choice reinforced daily. Liara had begun as a victim of colonial cruelty. She had become a survivor, building a new identity. Their bond was their anchor in the uncertainty ahead, their compass for whatever came next. The stars continued their silent journey outside the viewport. They represented unknown worlds, potential homes, futures unwritten. Liara watched them with calm eyes, no longer seeing threats in every shadow. Manus stood beside her, his posture relaxed but watchful. They had evidence to deliver, justice to seek, and a life to build. The path was unclear, but they would walk it together, their footsteps matched in purpose and resolve. The horizon carried them forward, its course set for truth and the slow, certain work of healing. The journey from abandonment to asylum showed justice demands courage across species lines. Manus's commitment to protecting Liara proved truth can overcome systemic corruption when allies unite against it. The story demonstrates that protection and principle can prevail over power when people choose to act. Their bond, forged in adversity, redefined the meaning of family and belonging. Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's the people who choose to care despite the cost. That choice becomes its own kind of shelter, stronger than any wall or weapon. It's where healing begins.